Matters. Awesome. So Grant, thank you for being here. I'm going to tell us a little bit about who Grant is, and then we'll get started. So after graduating from the University of Oregon in 2013, Grant made the decision to explore his interests in communication and technology in one of the most high-tech cities in the world, Seattle. There, he found great success working for Zillow and Seattle-Tacoma International Airport in lead marketing roles. He is currently the Integrated Marketing Manager at Qualtrics, an experience management company. Grant also serves on the board of directors for the UO Alumni Association and writes weekly thinkforyourself.co newsletters about focusing attention in our world of distraction, which I imagine for many of you is probably going to be timely. So thank you so much, Grant, for joining us today.
Absolutely, Shannon. Thanks so much for having me. And I've been telling Shannon all along, I've really enjoyed these opportunities so much to be able to connect with students, and especially now in these times, just to be able to be here for each other at the end of the day is such an important resource that we can all provide each other going through this time here right now. So yeah, I'm very excited to be here. And as Shannon mentioned, I'm still very involved with the U of O and even with the Lundquist College of Business. I was actually a School of Journalism Communication PR major myself, but I feel like I've been kind of adopted into the Lundquist College of Business through different participation. I've actually hosted a lot of student groups at Zillow in the past and being able to connect with students. So this is definitely something I really enjoy doing. So thank you for the opportunity. I was kind of thinking maybe we just start with like a cleansing, maybe deep breath. I know there's a lot going on in the world, and I know many of you attending here are seniors and kind of looking through your last couple now virtual months of being a student at the U of O and navigating just a really wild time right now. So maybe we just start with a quick kind of deep breath. Okay. And basically, I actually wanted to just start with a quick story where we're on a call this morning with our chief marketing officer at Qualtrics, and he shared with us this morning too. And he's someone who has a nice house, has a good family, has a good job, and even he was kind of saying this morning where, like, I'm just not my fully engaged self right now. I'm feeling all kinds of different ways right now. So I just want to make the point right off the top that this is not a normal time, and we shouldn't be expecting like normal things from ourselves and from others. So being able to really show a lot of empathy and really just being able to know that we're doing what we can on any given day, any given hour really right now, and to not beat yourself up over and to really just be okay with that fact is really important. But I was going to think of, so using the time here where I'll talk a little bit about my story, my career journey a little bit, how I kind of went from U of O and kind of started exploring different career opportunities. And then just, again, given that this is such a wild time here right now, I thought I'd try and give a few thoughts and matters of perspective to try and have you all something to think on and how to navigate this time. And again, would certainly welcome Q&A, and we'll kind of get to those as we go. So I, as Shannon mentioned, graduated in 2013, but I came to the U of O really thinking that I wanted to pursue a future in sports in some fashion, whether it be on the business side. I eventually found my way to the School of Journalism, so kind of pursuing more of the PR and kind of that communications end of things. So through my time in school, I had got a lot of great experience. I interned for the Eugene Emeralds, the minor league baseball team there in Eugene, for a season. I worked with the pit crew, the student section, as what I believe is the first director of women's sports, when it was like a huge accomplishment to get like 10 people to go to a women's basketball game, or 10 students to go to a women's basketball game. That, of course, has changed pretty dramatically in the last couple of years here. And then I also had a chance to work with Travel Lane County, the Visitors and Convention Bureau for Eugene and Lane County, and be a student ambassador leading tours through the U of O. So I, as I mentioned, I came in really thinking that I wanted this future in sports. So as I just kind of talked through some of the internships and work that I did while I was at the U of O and in Eugene, it really was a lot centered on sports. But I kind of had this moment where as I was going, and I loved my time working at the Eugene Emeralds, but it was one of those internships where I really learned kind of what I also didn't want to be doing with my life. I enjoyed the work, but it's a huge time commitment. And I had just started dating my now wife at that time. And as I was kind of forecasting ahead to what I wanted my lifestyle to look like, that wasn't it. And I think that's really okay. And it's important to use all the real experiences that you get to figure out, one, what are you really interested in, but also what are you not as interested in, and being able to start to pick up on some of those clues along the way. And I'll kind of talk through a few more clues that I've had here in a few minutes. But I also learned that I really enjoyed connecting with people. I learned that I really enjoyed helping people along and experience something new. So things like doing these webinars, being a student ambassador, and helping people navigate their way to the U of O. And some of my later career path kind of reflects that as well. So as I was graduating college, I was starting to look at where would I go, and my again now wife ended up moving up here to Seattle. So I started kind of looking through what are landing in Seattle essentially, and I was playing the same very nervous game where just kind of trying to find something that could stick essentially. And I applied to some jobs. I was a summer camp counselor through high school and into college a little bit over summers. And I was like, at the end of the day, if I am going to be a summer camp counselor for a summer after I graduate and just have something that pays me some money and kind of figure out my journey from there, that's totally fine. And I'll kind of talk through a little bit later on just every career journey is kind of a winding path. There's no sequential, like, first I take this step and then I climb the ladder to this next stage. And the glorified corporate ladder that you hear about, I think pretty much anyone working in the professional space right now will tell you that it is not just like this perfect linear ladder that you climb. It's not even necessarily something you're trying to climb. You're just trying to do something that feels right for you. So I ended up having a connection at Zillow, and I actually approached when I started working and talking with Zillow, where I had a chance to just connect with the head of social media at Zillow and do a very informal informational interview. So it was not anything related to a job. It was me purely just wanting to learn as someone who's really interested in social media. What is it like from a professional standpoint to work in social media? So I was just trying to gather information and feedback about what the industry looked like. And it just so happened that either I guess I was impressive on the information and on the call there, but it turned out that Zillow ended up having a summer internship for social media come open there. So that was really a time where I approached trying to network and reach out to people, but I wasn't also trying to like bang down their door and be like, do you have a job open for me? And I think that's a really, really important tactic to take when talking and interacting with people, since good things come to curious people who leave a good impression and are not just trying to hunt down a job solely, even though that may be your main focus, and I'm sure it is. So I started at Zillow first as a full-time social media intern right after I graduated, and then started to transition more into a marketing manager type role where I was leading marketing campaigns, and then actually so much so that I started to transition into working in kind of a community management space where I was actually pulling together a lot of Zillow's great customers and connecting them with one another. So I had an opportunity to really get a lot of experience on a small team before Zillow was really the household name that it is now today. About early last year, 2019, I transitioned actually over to the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, which for me had been like this kind of strange but long time dream come true. In my kindergarten yearbook, where it asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, it actually said someone who works at the airport. You can believe that, Shannon. But it was kind of funny where I think my thinking at that time was like I wanted to be the person with the sticks who's like guiding the plane in and that whole thing. That was my kindergarten mindset, but it ended up that I was able to kind of follow the professional communication and marketing.
I want to say it shows how, those dreams that you have kind of at any point can come back in this way you didn't expect. So, sure, maybe it's not the job you thought you were going to have when you were a kid, but it's still similar. It's still in the same industry. So it's important to think about those things.
Yeah. And so I had an opportunity to actually start building out a department there at the airport in communication and customer experience and whatnot. And it was a really, really cool opportunity and a very different culture from going from technology private sector into the public sector, just from just the speed at which these people and the cultures move and things like that and whatnot. So it's definitely, again, as you start to think about like what are the types of workplaces that you want to work in and kind of live on a day-to-day basis, these are important things to think about too, the cultural aspect of everything. And there's plenty of research that you can do online about all these companies, whether it be on Glassdoor or LinkedIn or different places like that to really see what's out there. And then kind of I had a great opportunity that fell into my lap a little bit at Qualtrics, where I was only at the airport for 9 months. I had no intention on leaving, but one of my very best mentors who I worked with at Zillow, who had moved over to Qualtrics, basically presented a job that seemed really right up my alley. But it goes to show just like that really deep like human connection and personal networking, like how it comes back in ways that you never think of years down the line. So just that's such an important point, I think, to hit on. And, you know, it was also an interesting move where I went from being kind of probably viewed as a more senior person at the airport, managing quite a few people, building out a department, to then going to Qualtrics where, you know, I've dropped back maybe down a few notches in terms of like how I'm viewed in seniority level. But that was also, again, in one of those kind of, as I figure out clues about myself through my career journey, is one of those times where, you know, chasing the fancy senior title wasn't necessarily what I was chasing or what I was after. And it's kind of what you're maybe trained to think like, okay, I got to spend my whole career getting to be the VP or the chief marketing or the chief executive, like whatever it might be. But you have to follow the path that speaks to you, and that path is going to change over time as you change and your interests change and everything like that. So important point to make there. And the other thing too, from going from Zillow and the airport then to Qualtrics, is I'd been in such a place where I was doing a lot with social media and being very like responsive and reactive to whatever thing was happening at that moment. And that was really hard for me to balance that from a lifestyle perspective, where you might have like this plan for the day on how things are going to go, and things are always going to be a little crazy, not perfect to plan. But when so much is up in the air every single day, it was really, really hard to manage. So again, on one of those additional clues that I picked up, I was able to kind of now land in a place where I'm not so much like beholden to whatever craziness is happening on the internet on any given day, and I have a little bit more control over what I'm doing. So I do appreciate that a lot. And then as far as some other items that really I think have helped my path and my journey here is Shannon mentioned about being involved with the UOAA, the Alumni Association. So I actually moved up to Seattle having never lived in Seattle. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I had no community, no connection here. So it was really a way for me to come to Seattle and get a part of a community that had meant so much to me in Eugene, but to have the extension of that in my new home that I really knew nothing about. So it was helpful for me to just get to know people and give back to the U of O in a way, because the U of O was such an impactful and an important place to me. So that's that piece. And so, yeah, so Shannon, I mean, it's really a lot of just, I really think of it as picking up on clues, and it wasn't something I wasn't even doing. Like I didn't know I was like picking up on all these clues necessarily along the way, but as I've been able to look back over the last years, as my career's kind of gotten started and started to take flight here, it is those clues that are really, really important to pick up on with yourself.
You know, and I think right now is a good time to kind of just ask a question before. I know you have tips to share, but I'm curious if you can think back on just really what you've been through, even where you were at a freshman year and to where you are now. Is there anything you might have wished you could have done differently in college that would have maybe just made things easier, or that would have just made now different for you, or accelerated where you are now? One of those, something like that.
I don't know. I'm usually one of the people that like don't like to be like, oh, if I could have done all these things differently. What I will say though, that I mean, just it kind of goes into some of the thoughts and tips that I have, is trying to get as much real world experience as you possibly can is a really big thing, and especially in our fields of business and whatnot, is I mean, so much of it, like the classroom learning is really, really important. But that real world application of whether it be internships or like even like kind of class projects where if you have the opportunity to work with businesses and organizations out in the wild, so to speak, it's really, really impactful since, and this is nothing to say on like the educational system by any means, but like the rate at which business and media and communication is evolving, like it's really hard for curriculums to keep up with all of that. And I think the U of O professors, both in business school and the journalism school, do a really great job with it. But until you've like really just like been a practitioner, it's really, really hard to pick someone out of the litter essentially that sure maybe has a great GPA but has no practical experience.
Awesome. Great. That's very helpful. I mean, I think folks need to hear that the balance of both is important. You know, it's good to do well in school, but also getting some of that outside practical experience, whether it is projects, internships, clubs, like real world outside experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's so many ways to get that sort of experience. And actually, it's a perfect segue into kind of one of my tips and thoughts here, which essentially is around this idea of really honing your existing skills and thinking about how you can diversify your existing skills. Not like widely diversify, but think a little bit broader maybe than you're thinking right now. And there's this book called Range that I find really helpful, but it's essentially around this concept of we do kind of live in a very specialized world in a lot of ways, and that can be really helpful. But I kind of subscribe to the philosophy that it's helpful to have like a pretty good set of understanding and kind of your sandbox, if you will, as opposed to I know this one thing like so well. That can be a little dangerous sometimes, I think, from a career growth opportunity. And I mean, my title right now, I think, exemplifies that really well. We're an integrated marketing manager, where I'm thinking about how do we kind of integrate and kind of bring together all of these different marketing channels? How do we think about building campaigns that are really impactful and effective? Whereas my past life, just thinking about social media, I was kind of in that bubble, in that box a little bit. And now I have the opportunity to know email marketing well. I know paid social media marketing, organic social media marketing, partnerships and syndication, events, all of these different areas. And I think the really important example here is, especially in this environment and in this economy here right now, if you've built up like a whole career being like an event marketer for physical in-person events, there's not a huge market for that right now since they can't happen. And frankly, they're probably like large, big time conferences might not be happening until fall of 2021. So thinking about how do you get the experience to host webinars and some of these digital events and bring people together in other creative ways is how you think about, I think, diversifying your skill set. Or if you're in sales, people might not have any budget to buy anything right now, but how do you use this time to start to build relationships with people and provide value and substance to people that then lead to that beneficial conversation down the line? So those are the types of like skills that you can do. And we talked about some other ways to get real world experience. I'll go back to my University of Oregon Alumni Association experience, where I actually took on then being president of our Seattle chapter up here, I think 2 years out of college essentially, where I then got that real world experience of leading people and managing an organization and doing that sort of work before I was managing people professionally. So it ended up being really, really important and a great selling point for me going back to Zillow and my organization saying, hey, I have this body of work that I've done, and it's in a pretty low stakes way, but I have the ability to say I have that experience. And wherever you can get that experience, and especially right now, I mean, the UOAA is a great place to do it, but there's so many other organizations that you could probably volunteer for that would love to have really skilled, capable people. And it might be a bummer that they can't pay you or they can't do like any of these sorts of things right now. But if you kind of play the long game with it a little bit, there's a lot of benefit coming from there. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, we have a few questions in Q&A. Do you want to go to those, or did you want to continue with some of the tips? What do you think?
Yeah, we can do a few questions.
Cool. So, and now is going to be a good time to tell folks who are watching, please pop your questions in Q&A at any time. It seems like a couple of the ones in there were timely to what you were talking about, Grant, so that's why I wanted to catch your attention. But yeah, for folks watching, please feel free to pop them in. So let's start with the first one. Do you have any tips for maintaining long-term connections with your network?
Yeah, so, and frankly, this is probably one of my other biggest and main tips is really building out that network is important. As I touched on in my journey and my story, I think building a network of shared connection and being able, like a mutually beneficial network is really important. And again, I can't stress enough if you approach people just solely asking for a job, that relationship is not going to go very far. But if you can approach them and especially in this time, like I think people overall are fairly empathetic and understand what's going on. And frankly, like the tactic I would use right now is thinking about like through LinkedIn, like there's amazing search capabilities in LinkedIn where you can filter down like people who have graduated from the U of O, who are in this city or in this field or work for this company or something like that. And just try reaching out to people. And I would position it as I'm about to graduate, and in kind of this time here right now, I'd love to learn a little bit more about just what your job and what your world kind of looks like a little bit as someone who's preparing to enter the real world essentially, and see if people would be willing to just have that very informal conversation for you to get to know more about the industry and kind of what the job looks like, since I think that was one of the biggest like holes or weak points that I had when I graduated is I just didn't like I knew broadly the types of jobs that existed out there, but I didn't really understand how they all kind of fit together. So developing that knowledge is really helpful. As far as maintaining long-term connections, I struggle with this one a little bit since I've always thought about maintaining like a group of people who I stay fairly close with, and like you're always going to have that kind of auxiliary group of people that are kind of there. But I think as far as maintaining long-term connections, I think, especially from a professional standpoint, like if you're on LinkedIn and you're posting different articles that you find interesting, or maybe like a question or asking for advice even, and opening up a conversation, I think like those are great ways to really do that. I'm sure like many of you during this time, like you've probably actually talked to a lot of people in the last month that you wouldn't be talking to if COVID wasn't happening right now. So just being able to put yourself out there and reach out to people and be like, hey, like it would be awesome to chat. And I think, again, literally the most senior person down to the very entry level person are all in this same boat where we're kind of in this like isolated sort of place right now where we don't have a lot of human connection right now. So we're craving that. And I think it's actually, the iron's really hot to strike there to try and reach out to people and to start and to continue those relationships that you have.
That's great. Sometimes what I like to tell students is, use the guise of being a student right now. Like people remember what it was like to be a student. And when you reach out, let them know you're a student, you're thinking about what you want to do next, or you have an idea, you want to learn from them, and that can be really powerful to get folks' attention. So along that same line, let's go to one more question and then we'll get back to yours. You kind of mentioned this, but when you moved to Seattle, what were your first steps to establishing a network specifically there? You mentioned LinkedIn a little bit, but might there be other things?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn was big. I mentioned how I started working and volunteering directly with the University of Oregon Alumni Association chapter. So just so you know, pretty much every large metro area, certainly along the West Coast, has a pretty well-established chapter in those areas. So it's a great opportunity to get to know people who volunteer for the chapter, who attend events, who, when there's a college football season, again, have watch parties and whatnot for events. So that was a great way, definitely through that very familiar U of O network. And then a lot of the larger cities have professional like networking groups. So, and there's so many ways to find them. I mean, Meetup is a popular one. Facebook groups, there's a lot of like groups just for, I don't know, there's a Seattle marketing men like group that I'm a part of that have like meetups once in a while. So there's a lot of ways to kind of poke around and find those sorts of groups, and bigger companies too. So, I mean, Zillow had them. I can speak to the Seattle sector here, but like Microsoft, like all the big companies have even within the company have usually some sort of employee like groups to connect around like certain interest areas. So there's definitely plenty of ways to be able to start to establish kind of connections and again reach out to people. I mean, you might get a lot of no's, but you may get a lot of yeses, and just like people willing to meet up for coffee. And it's just something people generally enjoy doing, having an excuse to get out of the office when they're in an office and meet up with other people. So yeah, that's what I'd suggest.
And I'm glad you mentioned resilience to the no's, because people will hear no, but it's okay to continue trying. So thanks for that point. Okay, I'll let you go back to your tips, and then we'll get more to Q&A. So please pop questions in as we're going, folks.
Yeah, and really, I think I just have one more, which kind of goes back to you mentioned I write this weekly newsletter kind of around think for yourself.co is where there's more information about it. But yeah, it's really like, as I talked about, like working for some of my first couple companies, I was in this place where there was just like always so much unknown and flying at me. And it was just, I was in this place where I feel like there were like so many different places I could be looking at any one time. And if you've experienced that before, where you get overwhelmed with so many options and things, overwhelming usually leads to not doing anything at all a lot of times, since you don't even know where to focus your attention or anything like that. So a lot of it kind of sprung from that idea, where just me kind of going through my life and kind of things I've picked up over time. I just like, again, to be helpful and put out what I've learned out there around how to really focus your attention to come up with the best ideas, since I think we're also in this place where we're so glued to our technology and inputs and just consuming stuff all the time that we forget to just like give ourselves time to think in a lot of ways. So that's kind of the broader genesis there. But my tip really is, I mean, for you as a graduating senior or trying to figure out how to navigate this, like it can be like incredibly overwhelming. I know it was for me, and I wasn't going through it kind of in the middle of COVID here, but what I would really suggest, and I mean, the example that I'll use for myself is I was basically trying to look at like, I think 4 or 5 different cities based on wherever my wife was going to go to law school, essentially as I was graduating. And that was way too overwhelming for me. I couldn't conceptualize trying to hunt down and look in 5 different cities for finding a job. So if you have the ability to hone in on a certain couple areas and go kind of deep into those areas, like that's really what I would suggest doing. I would think about, just trying to prioritize like what are the valuable actions, and not trying to get too overwhelmed and sidetracked by just like the ether out there of things that exist essentially as you're trying to navigate this, and to just simplify. And I mean, really the tip that I gave off the top here is just like, know that like this is a really crazy and not normal time, and to be okay with yourself if you're having a day where it's just like today's not the day and that's fine. Or I was really productive this morning, and for me this afternoon, I don't know, I wanted to go sit outside or something like that, and that's fine. And I think we have to be really understanding with ourselves right now is really, really important. And I don't know, I think just like be really open to the fact that like your journey like is going to be very personalized to you, and you're going to learn, and that journey is going to evolve over time. Is just, I can't emphasize that enough. And I think we get lured into thinking based on looking at Instagram or LinkedIn that like, oh, this person has had this like flawless, perfect career journey. And it's really easy to kind of put out exactly the beautiful career journey you want to present to the world out there, but knowing that, again, it's going to evolve over time. And just as one final example, and then we can go to Q&A here, is I was talking with a U of O student who graduated, I think 2 years ago, just over a Zoom here in the last week. And he's one of those people that had been like, he is like so dead set on being the lead communicator for this company up here in Seattle. And then basically got his foot in the door for this other role that was just within the company. But he had this like epiphany where he was like, wow, the culture and just the company is like, it's not exactly what I think I wanted. And it's totally okay. And he was kind of concerned, since he's like, I've built this whole, Instagram and Twitter persona around wanting to work for this company, essentially. And now it's kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I actually want to work there. And again, like it's okay. Like that, it's a very personal feeling, and things are going to evolve over time. So it's good to have a goal. It's good to have a North Star. It's good to have a target. But again, you have to be understanding with yourself that that's going to evolve and change over time. So I think, yeah, just really simplifying, building out your network in a mutually beneficial way, and really thinking about honing in and kind of diversifying your skill set so you can be broadly valuable in different ways is super important right now. And just kind of learning like the tools, I think, of business too. So whether they be the Slacks or the Microsoft Teams or Zooms, and starting to become really well acquainted with those, since what is appealing to hiring managers is someone who can come in and kind of have some of that knowledge down quite a bit. So it's a somewhat quicker onboarding process. So like with a little more downtime here and whatnot, I would really think about how to kind of hone your skills in those areas as well too.
Awesome, great. Now we're getting lots of good Q&A, so that was good times. Just first want to thank you for sharing all those tips. Those were really great, and I think we're getting some more specifics related to that. So the last kind of tip you were talking about was skills, right? Diversifying your skills, but honing them in at the same time. So our question from Keith is, what has been your most useful hard skill and soft skill?
I mean, soft skill for sure is communication. Whether you are a communicator in title or not, it's such like everyone needs to be able to communicate really, really well, and especially in this virtual world that who knows how much longer we're going to be living in. Like that is the lifeblood of keeping things moving, essentially. So the ability to communicate with your team, to tell people what you're doing and working on, that is absolutely so impactful, and certainly selling your ideas as well too is really important, and being able to figure out how to tell a story around what you're trying to communicate like is by far the most important thing I think that you can focus on. As far as hard skills go, I don't know. I mean, certainly some like in this world right now, definitely some of those technology pieces and tools that I talked about like are super important, since that is the currency by which we are kept together and progressing as a business. So those are really, really important. And if there's some tools like specific to where you work, like, or kind of the field, so like Salesforce is like a really important one that I use quite a bit. Marketo is like a marketing automation tool that I use quite a bit. So getting those sorts of skills out there are helpful. And a lot of these tools offer a lot of like free certification courses like on their websites too. So like Sprout Social is a social media platform, offers a whole bunch of training. Salesforce has a whole bunch of training. So I mean, there's the internet, going against my tip a little bit, provides like such a whole wall of resources out there. So maybe try and research and pick a few that makes sense to lean into.
Awesome, great. So this one might challenge you to reflect for a moment. What is a class that you took for granted or wish you took at the University of Oregon? And that's from Kevin.
I think, again, being a journalism major, there are some like introductory level classes around just like origins of communication in the media and everything like that. And I was probably in my sophomore, like whatever sort of phase, but I'm super fascinated, like I'm really fascinated by the history of media and communication and everything, especially as like there's so many cyclical things I think that are coming back, like maybe radio is not quite as prevalent, but like podcasting and like the audio form factor of storytelling is like gold right now and really, really important. And especially in this time period where I think we're kind of going back to some of these basics a little bit, and like actually returning to like having either video or like real conversations with people, and maybe a little less text, or at least augmenting it with with real conversation is really important. So I think like understanding like just the evolution of that is, I don't know, something that I think would have been really interesting to me. And again, being in the journalism school, I wish I frankly would have taken more business classes, just because what my role is like such that perfect wedge between what the business school is and what the School of Journalism is, and trying to kind of build up my knowledge and my base there.
I promise we did not plant that answer at all. So totally genuine for him. So Kevin also asked if you have connected with Career Services post-graduation at all for like career advice or opportunities. And maybe I'll go a step further if you did as well when you were ever in college. Did you ever connect with Career Services?
Yeah, I did quite a bit, and I think actually in the business school, the Central Career Center and the journalism one, I probably had plenty of stops in all of those. And I think, yeah, I mean, all of those resources are great. And I was actually just on campus, I don't know, a couple months ago, and got to see Tykeson Hall for the first time, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Hopefully I am. But like that's such an amazing resource to be able to have like those career services really centralized. So taking advantage of that, and especially with the business school, and you all are very fortunate in that there's so much professional staff like Shannon who are building relationships with organizations and trying to connect students there and build that kind of, that tie between the two. So I think those are great relationships to make. Of course, your professors are also really wonderful resources to use. And again, there's so many, even post-graduation, so many resources that I touched on within the Alumni Association to keep you connected. There's a whole branch of the Alumni Association that is fully dedicated to networking and keeping you connected. And they're doing a whole bunch of virtual chats right now and networking opportunities. And even one of the professors is leading a whole section on like beer making or something like that, which I think is just like super cool. So like there's just a lot of ways for you to stay connected to the U of O while you're in school, and certainly once you graduate.
Again, we did not plant that, so thank you. Okay, good. We're getting lots of questions here, and we're going to try and go for probably another like 15 minutes or so, and then wrap up. So just so folks know, thank you for all of those who stayed so far, and we really appreciate it. So next one, how do you navigate the rapidly changing communication styles during COVID?
You wake up every day and see how things are going. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's like overnight everything changed, as you all probably know. So I think it's really trying to, as much as possible, lead like with empathy and being able to be helpful to people. And just to illustrate how I'm doing that in my professional role right now is at Qualtrics, my role is basically connecting with HR professionals in large organizations around the world. So HR is kind of the most impacted organization within every single company right now, since they're thinking about a whole multitude of things, from how to keep people happy, how to navigate to having people work remotely, unfortunately having to do layoffs at a lot of companies. So there's a lot going on there. So what I'm trying to do is curate and package up really helpful content and resources. And we have a whole team of like PhD psychologists who do this sort of work on a daily basis, and trying to package that up and just provide resources and things that really are just dedicated to helping people navigate this time is really the biggest thing I think that we're doing right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy, for that question. That was a great question. This is a good one. From Kevin, what is some advice that you are glad that you did not listen to?
Let's see. Well, let's see. I'll go back on doing things that made you feel like I was planting some plugs for the business school. I've had a number of people, and actually the mentor that I have, who I'm working now with at Qualtrics, who I worked with at Zillow for years, she was trying to push me to get an MBA, and I've been frankly kind of anti getting an MBA myself for a while. So like I feel like that has been the right decision for me. But again, everyone's results may differ, and there's no one size fits all for that. But I come from like a lot of experimental learning, and I think just like being involved in a company and getting a chance to kind of become more senior in what I'm doing has opened me up to a lot of that learning that sure maybe could be accelerated by an MBA, but I've made the decision it wasn't right for me.
Fair enough. I will. It's a balanced conversation. Perfect. Okay, next one. Where do you get your industry news? And do you have book recommendations besides Range? From Kevin.
The industry news, let's see. Actually, so Buffer is a company that does social media marketing. So if you're interested in social media and kind of just general brand marketing, they're very good. HubSpot is a company that does a lot of really great content. So I'd recommend checking out their blog, and they actually do a whole host of different marketing certifications for free and like business certifications that are really helpful for, again, accelerating that knowledge gap that you might have. Frankly, those are the big ones. I try not to like dig like too deep into a lot of these. I like to follow like a few people on social media that kind of, especially like creative types who are really kind of pushing the envelope in terms of what they're doing and trying to use some of those directional guideposts to help align my thinking, but then again, giving myself enough time to do my own original and kind of creative thinking is usually how I like to try and approach that.
Awesome. And then again, just for folks watching, we're probably going to wrap up in about 10 minutes. And so we still have time for questions if you want to pop those in. Okay, so next one, oh, sorry, I just lost it scrolled. Look at technology. Okay, next one is Kevin, awesome, with the questions. How has a failure or apparent failure set you up for later success? And then the second part, as you're thinking of that, is also, do you have a favorite failure of yours?
Yeah, we'll group these all together. I was approached trying to be as open and candid as I possibly can. So I had a number of years ago, I went and presented to like our top C-level executive at Zillow about a community program that I was working on, and I obviously prepared and like did this whole like PowerPoint slide and was like ready to go. And I walked in, and first, it was like he was like distracted for the first 10 minutes and wasn't really listening, and then just like kind of totally like ragged on like my presentation essentially, and it was tough. Like I walked out of there like just like not knowing what to think. But the the feedback that I got was that I was just trying to present too much, and like there's kind of too many words on the slide. I was trying to like say too much and at too much depth as well. So I guess the takeaway for me in that is to really understand, and this all goes back to communication, which we were just talking about, to like understand your audience that you're talking to. Like if you're talking to a C-level executive, the altitude essentially that you need to fly at is very different than the altitude you need to fly on if you're talking to some of your team members that are going to help you execute this project essentially. So that was really important. And the other thing that kind of came in that is just really the power, even in our very data-driven world that we live in, the power of like anecdotal like examples and stories and bringing that in to really help drive a point home is quite important.
That is a great example. I mean, that whole idea of simple communication to your audience, or more in depth depending on your audience, is so important. Okay, Sebastian has a question. As a marketing manager, do you conduct market research, or does your company pay others for market research? Thank you.
Yeah, so I've had both over the years. So actually, Qualtrics, our whole business is going out and doing, helping to actually provide the tools in the system to do that market research. At Zillow, we had a team that was like responsible for doing the market research, but would like contract out and work with different vendors to compile that, and use it in a whole host of different ways. So like everything from creating like who are the buyer personas that we work with, so like who are the main like targets that we're trying to create our business for essentially, to how to like create the right kind of TV commercial that will like land well with the audience, and social media, and like all these different things. So there's a whole lot of different ways that content gets used.
Great. So we'll take one more question if anybody has it. But I didn't skip over Amy. Amy gave me one that I was waiting till somewhat of the end for. So we'll go with that for now. And if anybody has one, pop it in. But if I were interested in joining the Alumni Association after college, what are the best next steps? Yeah,
so as you're kind of going through your senior year, there's a lot of kind of graduation type activities where it's kind of the, requesting your diploma and all of those things. And I know a lot of that's now going to be virtual and online. But yeah, it's a lot of just like being able to give your non-U of O email is really, really important, since being involved with the organization right now, it's a decent sized issue, is that it's hard to stay contacted with people after school, since the U of O email goes away. So that would be a big thing. And I mean, yeah, just kind of watch your email and watch social media for different types of events. But UO Alumni, if you go to the website there, it has a whole bunch of different ways that you can get involved. And then if you're not a senior and you're still in other years, the Student Alumni Association is also a great association that puts on a lot of different events and kind of starts to, prepare you for that time.
Awesome. It looks like we have not gotten any other Q&As. So Grant, if you wanted to kind of wrap up with any last minute thoughts for folks.
Yeah. So yeah, again, thank you so much, Shannon, for having me on. This was really wonderful. And again, I like send and have so much empathy for everyone right now. Again, from the super senior person, even, and certainly all the way to people who, like you, who are trying to figure out how to navigate these next steps. We're all in this together. And as I said, kind of honestly, day by day, just kind of seeing how things go. And as humans, it's really, really hard when we feel like we don't have control over what's going on. And this is a perfect example of, like, we have no idea what the timeline looks like for this. We don't have control over what's going on, but trying to find places where you feel like you can find some sense of control, and whether that be, again, continuing your learning and diversifying your skill set and networking with people, like those are definitely areas that you can control, and hopefully in the process give yourself like a somewhat more like calm and peace of mind in the world that's happening around us right now. So yeah, that's definitely what I'd say. And I mean, don't be afraid to start in a place that maybe feels like so far from wherever your stated goal or place that you want to get to at some point. Like your career path is going to be this jungle gym where you like are on the monkey bars and then you're going down a slide the next minute, and you'll kind of come over here, but it all kind of works itself out in the end. And just kind of trust in the process, which I know is kind of a hard thing to internalize, but you'll eventually get there. You'll learn about your interests and yourself, and eventually kind of get where you're going.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Grant, for taking time. And I am sure folks who've watched will connect with you on LinkedIn and reach out and thank you themselves. So that will be wonderful as well. And just thank you for being a resource for our students. It's wonderful. Yeah. We need folks to do that. So.
Absolutely. And yeah, as Shannon said, like totally feel free to find me on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to Shannon or something. She'll get in contact. But I'm more than happy if you'd like to just do like a 30 or 45 minute like Zoom call or conversation. Like I'm happy to be a resource and just kind of, or sounding board or whatever you want me to be, if like I can be of support to you. So feel free to reach out to me.
Wonderful. And that effort, thank you everybody for joining. We really appreciate your time and hope you learned some cool stuff. Please remember that all of the Career Services team is here for you. So we in Mohr Career Services help business students, the University Career Center, and then School of Journalism. Other folks have career support as well. So please reach out. We're still here virtually, and we still want to help you navigate that as Grant said, that kind of zigzaggy path, and help you think about just what's the right next step for now, as we are all going through this. So thank you all so much for your time, and we will see you next time.